Here. Welcome, everybody, to the Synapse Philosophy Group. I'm your host, Dr. Haig John, and we are starting the senior text of Stephenson's textbook, page 230. And we've done this before, but there's history, there's philosophy. We have the 33 principles. There's so much enrichment to chiropractors, and the denizens of the earth. This should not be kept just for chiropractors. And I don't mean just to make it small in any way, but in reality, this is philosophy for all people. It really is. So, without further ado, I'm going to start reading. How's that sound for everybody? And then we're going to pass off a little bit because if I run out of steam with my voice, all right? Okay.
Hey,
Yeah.
there's just as we're starting, and we talked last week about using part of Strauss's book, and just as we start, one of the first things Strauss says, Dr. Joe Strauss says, is, it seems to me there should be more repetition in chiropractic for the basics always seem to be lost, and that accounts for the majority of the slipping in practice.
Yeah.
That's his comment as he starts his comments on the senior text. To repeat this over and over, because we need to keep it strict in the forefront of chiropractic.
You know, and I'm thanking you for bringing that up because I actually forgot to bring home my Strauss book. Can you just hold it up? Which volume it's in?
Oh, I got my background blurred, so it won't show up very well.
That's okay.
It is the Green Book's Commentaries 14, 1927 by Joe Strauss, and it's a blue book, and it's
Yeah.
Can I get it? Nah, it's not going to
Yeah,
find
we got it. It's okay. It's okay. We'll work it out. Well, just saying that, one of our neighbors and friend, she just won, basketball coach of the year for, their division, an amazing thing. And really, it's all about fundamentals, right? Just like you just said, it's all about the basic stuff. There you go. Green Book commentaries. Good. 14. Is that 14?
Sorry, it's reversed in that image, but.
All right, we're going to start.
No, I'm already on this.
And I'm just going to mute some people out. We'll just mute everyone out. And the senior text is an elaboration of the principles of chiropractic and advanced work in theory and practical phases. Okay. Article 304 dates. The history of chiropractic is really the history of adjustments. Quotation from volume number 4. Although chiropractic was not so named until 1896, yet the naming of chiropractic was much like the naming of a baby. It was 9 months old before it was named. Chiropractic, in the beginning of the thoughts upon which it was named, dates back at least 5 years previous to 1895. During those 5 years, as I review many of these writings, I find they talk about various phases of that which now constitutes some of the phases of our present day philosophy, showing that my father was thinking along and towards those lines, which eventually suddenly crystallized in the accidental case of Harvey Lillard, after which it sprung suddenly into fire and produced the white hot blaze. End quotes from B.J. Palmer. Produced the white hot blaze of chiropractic, the wildfire. As chiropractic grew, other important things useful in chiropractic were discovered. Palpation between 1898 and 1900. Nerve tracing, 1905, which was an excellent chapter in Didi's 1914 book. The Merrick system, 1909. Spinograph, 1910. Taut and tender fibers, 1922. Neurocolometer, 1924. Note, I heard BJ explain taut fibers in 1920 in his classes as if it were then old to him. That's pretty interesting, perspective from Stephenson himself. but no one seemed to pay much attention to it until 1922, when he had begun to emphasize it. So 1922 is the date mentioned, RWS. History of Adjusting, Article 305. I prefer to quote BJ in Majors and Minors, page 7, in order to tell the history of adjustments. The first patient who received a chiropractic adjustment was Harvey Lillard, a colored man. The incident, in brief, follows. He had been deaf 17 years, so much that from the fourth floor of the building where he was janitor, he could not hear wagons moving on a streetcar rolling on the streets below. That's an interesting, perspective that we don't know in the modern world of cobblestone streets and horse-drawn carriages, but I bet it was very loud. When asked how he became deaf, his explanation follows. While in a cramped, stooped position, I felt and heard something pop in my neck. Immediately, I went deaf. To one who was observant, a student, that would be an accidental eye-opener. It was to D.D. Palmer, who asked, "What is the connection between the back and hearing in the ears?" He examined the back. By good fortune, the first case in which the spine was examined was thought in view. A large lump was found. It was not one of the most common bumps we see today in palpation, but so prominent it could be seen with the eye. That's pretty interesting. Okay. Following consequential reasoning occurred. If there was no bump when the hearing was good, and the palpation of this bump destroyed hearing, production of this bump, why don't the reduction of the bump restore hearing? The first attempt to correct that now is subluxation, and the section was then made. The patient was put upon the floor, face down, and a shove-like movement given. The bump was reduced. So by the first three shoves, and the third day, hearing was restored. Hearing could, Harvey could hear a watch tick at the average distance you and I can today. The next question was, if the reduction of one bump in one man restores hearing, why won't a similar bump in other people reduce deafness? And if it does, why wouldn't reduction of these bumps in the same way restore their hearing? It was tried on others, but a peculiar series of circumstances. The results did not come as readily as their cases, but eventually they came. Then the third question asks, if a bump in the back caused deafness, why not other parts of the spine produce other disease? So our question was gradually enlarged until, by a systematic series of investigations covering years, you have your chiropractic of today. Now I'm going to pause. DD does say in 1910 that he worked for 9 years before he gave that adjustment to Harvey Lillard. And that was from DD. And he's quoting from what book? Do you guys remember? What did he say?
He said 1914.
Majors and Minors. No, he's quoting Majors and Minors on page 7 of B.J. Palmer's book, History of Adjustment.
That's right. Sorry.
So this is from BJ. Okay, I just want to make that clear. DD says it in different ways in the story. Okay, and he also said the pop he heard in his neck. If you didn't read that I just read, and DD said it was in his back, and then he does say
he said back here. You read it. You read neck, but he said back here.
He does say back later on, but he does say neck first. That's all. Okay, so which is we're just picking out the differences and seeing what's, if it makes whatever. When we had assumed as a matter of education that breadth of ideals where they become subluxations, we no longer assume to shove. We develop the push and pull principle, which was of various forms and methods.
You
Okay.
skipped the paragraph here that I don't think we want to miss.
Oh,
here.
education advanced, my mistake. Why don't you go ahead and read it, Alan?
Education advanced. After a period, we ceased calling them bumps. They became dislocations. We, at a later time, were impressed with the idea that this bump was not a dislocation. It was in reality not a dislocation, but partial, more assuming the character of a luxation, not a luxation. It was subluxation. So that's sort of the evolution of the term to subluxation in BJ's mind here.
Now, I also want to point out, 1914 book was not really brought back. I think, what was that? Probably in the 1950s when they reproduced the book. So at this time, I think this was, it was one of the even more obscure books, very difficult to get DD's 1914 book at this point. In 1910, I just found the paper from Todd from the history page about when that was re-released in the 1950s, the 1910 book. So there's a big gap in our time, in our history of when DD's writings were more popular in chiropractic. I just saw you just unmuted, Barry.
Yeah, thanks for observing. That doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't being produced, because the Palmer School of Chiropractic printery was happening. And in the 50s, it was way different than what it was in the 20s and 30s. So I know Baboot and Indiana College, the red version, did theirs in the 50s. I believe that the red copy you have is from Baboot College, I believe, in Indianapolis. So when the patent had left, other people were able to pick up and reproduce it, just like Delta Sigma Chi can now, Sherman College of Chiropractic. So even though the 1914 book was done and it wasn't reproduced until the 50s, that doesn't mean that Palmer School of Chiropractic wasn't printing those books and supplying them to the students, because it was a textbook that was used for the school.
While BJ was there?
Even while BJ was there, these books were being printed.
Now,
They were printed.
I know that the 1910 book, though, was from the Oregon Press, right? Or Portland Press or something like that. And they were not producing it.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to re-look into this. So the books were all produced because the school and we were trying to establish our own library, our own lexicon, our own textbooks. And this was Palmer's goal, to do that, because then you're able to self-govern yourself, right? When you're writing your own textbooks and you have it. And so that was really the push for it. It wasn't just to write our philosophical thoughts. That's why we have, the other versions, spinography, diagnosis, all those are legit chiropractic textbooks for any school to use.
Absolutely.
So I'll find out the details on the 1910 or 14 book. But when Palmer Specific Chiropractic started printing these green books, they printed them as long as they could, as long as the sales were up, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that it was, he wrote it, they produced it in Portland, it was done. I don't think that was done.
What I'm hearing is from secondhand information from the old guys of how it was very hard to get these books back in the day when they were trying to get them. I mean, they were looking for DD's writings and they were searching, just like we, absorb it. They were looking for it diligently. And some of those guys, like Pasquale, William Werner, and all those guys, they were looking for that stuff, and it wasn't easy to find. That's what I heard anyway. And if it wasn't selling, like you said too, they usually don't produce something that's not making money because it's got to pay for itself. I could see that too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Well, just maybe I wasn't paying attention, but was the last thing we read what you read, Alan, beginning with education?
Yeah. Then I skipped a paragraph.
Because 2 paragraphs down, I find it very interesting.
Well, we'll get to that.
That the word mechanical is in bold caps. So we'll get to it.
Well, that's what we're going to read right now. How about that?
Yeah.
We began at a following period to
No,
study the
we
spine.
haven't read where you'd resumed yet.
I thought that when I just
We
I read
ended, when
that,
it was
skip it.
subluxation, you didn't read that whole paragraph. Pick that back up there when we assumed.
All right. When we had assumed, as a matter of education, that breath and idles, they became subluxations, but we no longer assumed to shove. We developed the push and pull principle, which was which of various forms and methods. Yeah. We began at a following period to study the spine from a mechanical point of view. Until this time, the only people who attempted to study the spine as a machine were osteopaths, although pathologically, they still regarded man as chemistry and physics. We confined our observations of mechanical ideas to the spine, so much that we brought out the knowledge of kinematics of the spine, both normal and abnormal, as to palpation, apposition, apposition, and subluxation. We then began the study of pathological, traumatic, anomalous conditions of the spine. At that time began the gathering of the osteological collection, which we now possess for the purpose of elucidating the theories then held and propagation of others. It became necessary that we it became necessary that we know the human spine, that as the keynote of the study of causes, all caps, of disease of man. We study the spine of characters, thousands of bones, that we might better reach a new thought or idea in progress. How well that has been done, you know today. Hours, months, and years were spent in the study of dead bones to be able to give thoughts that may be taught in a few minutes. Yet it took years to reach the conclusions given in a few minutes. That's an interesting perspective, right? All that work we sum up in a few lines of all the work Dee did, all the work BJ did, right? When we study the spine, mechanically speaking, we realize that treatment was far-fetched in its application. As describing the thing we attempted to do, being a machine mechanically constructed, mechanically subluxated, it should be mechanically adjusted. Then came the word adjustment. Approximately 6 years ago, we began a series of clinical tests or investigations from a new viewpoint. I refer to spinographs. Until that period, the X-ray had not been used in its application to human spines in living individuals for the purpose of ascertaining the approximate detailed apposition of the vertebra, normal, abnormal, and traumatic. When we made our first series of spinographs, we were the first to touch the vital question. There existed no previous technique for our observations or work. It became necessary to develop a system of taking spinographs to prove that subluxations existed. Where of what character? We began tabulating these observations, which today we are ready to say makes another step. These conclusions are based on the readings and studies of over 50,000 spinographs, all of which were taken in our laboratory with this definite end in view. It is no longer sufficient to say that we adjust with the recoil. We are ready for our next step, which may call 206. I don't know what that means. 206. Although I prefer the toggle recoil because of its application by the new series of observations made from the spinograph's facts. History is history. The his, in the case being the author, who has lived it, began the cause for a large majority of it. Therefore, the source of the facts here recorded could not be improved. B.J. Palmer. All right. When I'm reading that, I found my X-ray class basically I did with Clarence Jensen, who was at Clearview with BJ. He was my toggle mentor, and he went through the X-ray as BJ taught him X-ray, and we drew it all out. We put it all on paper and laminated it. And there's about 4 or 5 of them, and I need to frame them, put them on the wall. But I'm going to take pictures and post them on this page, and that should be really a lot of fun. And I really need to find the video of me because I videoed it back then with my old high 8, little camcorder, and I really need to find that video. I think that would be a good one. Anybody have any insights or input or like to say anything at all after that big section?
Seems very much emphasizing the mechanical, yet pretty soon we'll go right to the article, the major premise.
Yeah.
Which
And
is
why is
just
he doing
mechanical.
that? And this is the mechanical stuff. He's saying it over and over again. I'm wondering about that. Barry, you unmuted. What's up?
Yeah, so back on page 231, something that stood out to me is that Harvey Lillard went on the ground face down. I thought he was on a table because Palmer has him on a table. All the pictures have him on a table. He has chairs, he has tables in his magnetic office.
Yeah.
But this quote here says he was on the ground face down, which I know usually people go face down. That's uncomfortable. They usually turn their head to the left or right. So this is real interesting. And it does say back on here a couple of times. It doesn't say neck, and it makes me wonder too, because I was told as a student that they wrote back because back then they would have been afraid and horrified to even mention any type of work being done on the neck.
Well, that part where BJ did try and say it was the Atlas, and then he went back and said, in other later series, he starts talking about being, the fourth dorsal. But the fourth dorsal, I really feel, BJ did try and skew that when he was doing his upper cervical work. And that's where Dee started getting upset. He was just a lad. How would he remember if it was the neck? He was like 13, I think, at the time. If it was the neck or his back, or what have you. How would he know if you read some of Dee's writings about that? So those are all, why we're reading this right now and actually talking about it, because they're different storylines that kind of spun off from the book hitting him in the back. I've heard that one for years too. And it felt weird when he hit him in the back. He said, "Hey, something's going on here. What's going on with your back?" And, from the floor, I've actually never heard the floor one. I heard, he put him on his bench and, he adjusted him. Like you said, I would expect him to have some sort of working table being the magnetic healer, right? Why would he use the floor? Maybe that to get a hard surface, Anybody else? All good insights. Thank you for that, Barry and Steve. All right. We're getting there. I know you guys are anxious. All right, but we still read a couple more pages. Bob, go ahead.
I went to National College, and Joe Jancy was still there when I was there. And he came into our class. He was emeritus. He wasn't actually a president anymore. And he came into our class and he told us a story about how he was in a debate on television with a medical doctor who was saying, how in the world could the fourth dorsal, an adjustment at the fourth dorsal, affect the hearing? And Jancy said that he explained very simply that the sympathetic chain down there sent innervation up to the inner ear, and the doctor said, I can't dispute that, and that was the end of that.
Uh-huh.
Well, there you go. There you go. probably National College is more principled than most of the principal colleges these days, back in those days. Anyway, I'm not
John,
picking on
I
any
mean,
schools.
hey,
I thank God for chiropractic schools.
hey, didn't you mention that there was a relationship between, I thought you might have mentioned one of the dorsals to the heart.
Well, that's the circulatory ganglia. The fourth dorsal is the bottom floor of the circulatory ganglia, which is actually all the way to the atlas. So
And
it's
you know what I
atlas,
found
fourth
out
dorsal.
today for the first time? I didn't know
Pardon?
this. I found this out just today
Yeah.
that the EKG measuring the electricity of the heart was invented in 1895. Did you know that?
It's a big year. Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't know that right away, and thank you for sharing that.
I just
Absolutely. I mean,
found
how
out
cool is
today
that?
because I'm listening to things having to do with the heart math. Yeah.
I'm going to keep going. All right.
Yeah.
Four viewpoints of area adjusted from Maj and Min,
Major and
major and
minor.
minor, page 9. From the question of, I think we got to read that one now too. From the question of area of the spine worked upon, there have been four viewpoints in adjusting work. One, ordinarily, we shoved, but one of the backbones and our patient got well. All of which was pure accident, for we did not know why this place should neither was there a rule for application. Ask where to shove for this or that, and we didn't know. The spine was unexplored territory. Being unexplored territory, wishing to get our cases well, irrespective of what we had, knowing that it came from the spine somewhere, we shoved every backbone at each sitting each day. We began at the seventh cervical and cleared down to the sacrum. We did not shove cervical vertebra in those days. We were afraid to. We shoved them all one by one on the ground. That we did not know where to shove for any particular trouble. We had no Merrick system. The spine was not mapped out. Therefore, hit them all to be sure we hit the one involved. It was not a hit or miss proposition. It was a hit 'em all method. So we couldn't help but get the one involved. It was a case of lazy man's load, being too indolent to think or reason. We made a shotgun series of shoves, much like Uncle Howard Nutting said he got the burglar in his house. He started at the garret, went clear down to the cellar, shooting into every corner where a burglar could. Therefore, he was sure he got the burglar. Okay.
I don't know if
No,
any of you guys ever went to a chiropractor that worked like that. I was, I'll say, lucky enough to experience that once, where I went to somebody who literally, went up one side and down the other, went up one side of my neck and down the other, just everything up and down
now
from the top to bottom. I was
to
like, it
understand
was,
the theory of that, there's more to that than what BJ Palmer is saying here. You really BJ's also selling his technique, which is HIO, right? So what was actually happening, the other philosophy, is that the garbage and the debris hangs out in the joints. And that tone, bong, like Pasquale used to say, breaks up that debris. It's clearing the system. All that garbage hanging out in the trabeculae. And as we're adjusting, that's the system becomes more clear. And I've been adjusted like that a lot. And I felt absolutely amazing afterwards after clearing. I've even, Pasquale told me once you might see darkness in your urine, might feel really hot. And it did. And I've renewed afterwards. But that's the philosophy behind it. Some people might do a flying seven, don't know what they're doing, but there's a reality behind what you're saying. And I just want to make that clear. It is not willy-nilly. All right.
I'm
Anybody
just
else on?
referring to that. That's what he's talking about here is that's part of the development was we were at this point, and we're reading here, they weren't sure. And so they did everything, but that didn't all necessarily disappear
Well,
instantaneously
I
later on.
also feel Dee Dee did a heck of a lot of work to get them even to where they're starting off on. I mean, let's be
Yeah.
really give the man some credit. Right now, it's like, BJ's taking all the credit for chiropractic in my mind. And Dee Dee did a lot to get them to that point. And I'll put it in that sense to me of what I'm reading out of here. Okay.
At Columbia Institute of Chiropractic, Dr. Whitehorn taught us specific atlas adjustment, but in the clinic, Dr. Gutstein was of the opinion you just rack them both ways, and it shakes it up, and then it'll make it and get it right. So there at clinic, it was the opposite of what we got from Dr. Whitehorn. So there you have both ways of thinking.
There you go. Notwithstanding, I have not said in a very long time. Go ahead, Robert.
Like you did, Haig, I had an opportunity to get adjusted by Pasquale for actually a couple of years, every Thursday night. So I knew how he adjusted. He adjusted every bone in the spine. He adjusted your fingers, your feet, everything.
Is that right?
Yeah, he did. And he did explain that it had to do with clearing the debris from the bones, and that was his principle. And just and a credit to him, he taught neurology at chiropractic school. So it's not like he didn't know what was going on. He knew what was going on.
And he taught at Columbia, and he and Reggie Gold were there, and they didn't want to take any money. And both of them, Pasquale and Reggie, said, "Okay, pay me $1." And I could imagine what that place was like. Could you imagine it? I would have loved to have been there. You were at Columbia, Steve. I don't know if you were in the day that they were there.
No,
but,
I wasn't.
Yeah, it was probably just after your day there.
Well,
or before.
Pasquale came and spoke it, but he didn't teach there.
Yeah. So, notwithstanding, the extreme shotgun method was in vogue in the chiropractic style 1896 to 7. Notwithstanding, a major application of Merrick system began 1895, and the major application went
1898.
out of, pardon? 1898.
98.
And the major application went out of style and has been ever since. Yet inconsistent as now appears, there is one lone advocate in our ranks who insists upon every vertebra being adjusted today, not being taught today in any chiropractic school, not being known by the largest majority of our ranks. It is not known except to the oldest chiropractors. Hence, when it is sprung at some meeting, it awakens a bit of interest, not because of its reason or logic or brilliancy or deduction, but because of its startling contrast nature.
Yeah. Cool.
The third viewpoint came following the deduction of the radiation of nerves from specific parts of the spine to specific organs of the body. The Merrick system being the basis, the specific system of adjustment came into vogue, and now we now adjusted only the subluxations for which the patient had a disease.
Uh-oh.
For example, our case has heart, stomach, liver, bowel trouble. The subluxation Merrick system were HPSPKPPP. This man, instead of getting 17 shoves at the back, got 4, 1 for each. It eliminated the useless and concentrated on the useful. It was direct, a subluxation for disease, thus its title, specific.
Wow, it was practicing medicine.
Yeah. It was treating symptoms. Or
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. The fourth viewpoint is our present major and minors, wherein we take the specific system, a major and minor one in reality. Under this system, we classify the symptoms of the four given troubles above and possibly find that 2 or 3 of the diseases this case has are adaptive to the 1 or 2 subluxations. Hence, are minors of the major. The adjustment of the latter taking care of the former. More of this appears later in quotation, in parentheses. There have been, in reality, 4 periods in the history of chiropractic moves. First, the shove. That with its variations from NOS to 71 to 78. Second, push-pull with its changes from NOS 70 to 200. Third, the recoil with its modes from NOS 201 to 205. Fourth, the period of toggle recoil or 206.
What are those NOS? What is that?
I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think these are the numbers of the adjustments that are illustrated in the book, Majors and Minors.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Article 307, the Palmer toggle recoil, which at Sherman College, we have donated to Sherman College. The Palmer toggle recoil number 206 is still being used at the one specific best move, which accomplishes the greatest percentage of adjustments. However, since the time the above was written, BJ, the new posture or knee chest posture or Palmer posture came into use as a new phase about 1922. It is Dr. Palmer's opinion, supported by the faculty of the Palmer PSC, that is the best posture for the patient, which, used with 206, is the best combination to date. See the Art of Chiropractic textbook of the Palmer School of Chiropractic in parentheses. Okay. How chiropractic was named. Chiropractic was named by Dr. Samuel Weed, H. Weed, a minister well-versed in ancient languages. Chiropractic is a word composed for the Greek. Cheer, Cheir, meaning the hand, and practos, meaning done, hence done by hand. Chiropractic always runs true to its name. The chiropractor adjusts subluxations with hands only, and therefore must have dexterity and skill. This is art. Okay. So that is the beginning of the senior text before we get to principle number 1, where, this is the way he's laying these out, these articles. Do you feel, before we get into them, how do you feel what we've just come through? Anybody have any insights? Do you feel the 33 principles were meant to be what, as we revere them today and use them for our talks and philosophy, and really we've embraced the 33 principles. It's a small part of chiropractic philosophy, right? Do you think he expected it to be what it is today? What do you guys think?
What, the philosophy to be a small part?
The 33 principles, we're about to start. This was the introduction to it.
I believe he was a firm believer in them.
Yeah, a firm believer. But did you think it was going to have the resonance through chiropractic through generations that it really did? I mean, it really still does.
It's irrefutable. I disagree with you saying there's resonance, because I don't see a chiropractic school named the 33 Principles of Chiropractic.
True.
We ask all the students if they know them or who wrote them, they probably wouldn't answer it. But they're indefutable. They'll be around. They'll be here.
They're timeless. I really feel they're timeless. They really are. And we just finished the 1914 book, all of us. Everybody that's on here has been in it. We have people come and go all the time, but a lot of what came out of there, we have in the 33 principles. We talked about it. Go reference it when you're watching this video. But I'm excited to start it. And I'm really thinking we
It's
kind
like
of ran
the
out of time
introduction.
today.
It
Pardon?
seems like the introduction to the senior text sounds, for me, where's the philosophy there? Where's the spirit of that? There is none. And then it just jumps into the major premise, which is majorly eternal, man.
But
And he said mechanical,
he's citing the
mechanical,
history. He's
mechanical.
review. The senior text's a review of what's been taught previously to students, and he's reviewing history here.
Okay.
He's given a review, and then he's going to talk about the principles. And I don't have a challenge with that. I think that there's some value in that, and you have to remember this was a senior text. You had freshman,
That's
sophomore,
true. Yeah, that's
junior, and
right. It's
senior.
not like we're starting. Yeah.
This is the review text. And again,
That's what
you got to repeat and repeat and repeat, and it's not being repeated enough today.
Now,
Yeah, I can dig it.
the reason why we're starting in the senior text is because we are a little bit more advanced in what we're doing. That's why I always just go straight to the senior text. We've all been doing this a while. Should we go back to, the freshman text is where the 33 is actually, this is a repeat, just like Alan said. Go ahead, Barry.
Oh, good.
Oh, I thought you unmuted. So we could, because his commentary really, is more a little bit more of an advanced philosophy, because he's he's expecting seniors in school to be reading this, not freshman text, which is slightly different, the way he describes things. I just think you can feel more heart and soul from Stephenson than this one. But this was a good journey. I mean, this is a great start.
So does anyone know the other book Stephenson wrote?
No.
I don't know.
Tell me about it.
Volume 14, and any guesses? All right, so it was actually mentioned on page 236. The Art of Chiropractic, Stephenson wrote. It's a little booklet. It's a rare book, but he wrote that as well.
So
do you know what the clip notes? What? Tell me about it.
What was that called again? I'm sorry.
So the Art of Chiropractic.
Art of Chiropractic.
Yep. So it's a little bitty booklet, and what he did is basically it's a technique book. So the toggle recoil applied to the knee chest adjustment, which he was talking about there.
Got it.
Oh my
So
gosh,
most people just know him as
book.
Yeah, it's a rare book. So
do you have one?
I do.
I wonder if
Of course you do.
Of course you do. I now I'm wondering if I've got one somewhere that I don't even realize I have. I've got to go look through my junk.
But this is interesting. Like you were talking about the guys and gals earlier, where back in the day they didn't have these books, and like we all remember times where you had to have a catalog, and they had to be in order and in stock, and you had to know where to search for that catalog. Where now, day and time, you can look up on the internet. So just think about back in the 20s and 1900s with horse and carriage delivery, barely even train delivery, delivering these books that were published and printed. I still don't even have an original D.D. Palmer book, and I've been looking for one for 25 years.
Oh my gosh,
so let alone, like you were saying, the information and quest for them to get these books and get their hands on it are very challenging.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. The 1910 book, it's literally, the font is different here, when you're looking for them. But, they're around. I have to go look for this book now. Now you've got me a little bit excited about that one. Because Stephenson, I like to read his writings. I think he's well written, and he expresses himself so well, and he uses commas and periods. That DD and BJ there's a genetic trait with those guys.
Well, they didn't graduate high school.
Hey, but like you said, we've been talking about this. D.D. Palmer, you're saying it. You think about it, even more difficult 1895 in rural, Midwest to find a library. It's not in New York City going to the Metropolitan Library, where you can find these books. He was searching them out everywhere he could. He referenced books from the 1600s. And, he was a learned man. He found everything he could, right? And so did BJ, obviously. I mean, these guys were doing everything they could. I mean, even the Dewey Decimal System wasn't invented yet at this point, I don't think. Okay. Could you imagine trying to find books? I just couldn't imagine. Oh my gosh. Well, the next week, we're going to start the major premise, principle number 1. That's page 236. Okay. I know there's a PDF. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, well, it was hard to find books. I can't imagine how they found all of that, all those osseous stuff that they found. I don't even want to go there.
Yeah. Even the
They were
cadavers of
grave
some of the
robbers.
schools back in the day. Go ahead,
They were
Alan.
grave robbers.
That's why they had Uncle Howard nutting. He took care of that with shotgun method.
Oh my God. Howard Nutty. That is funny. That was funny. Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is it's been an awesome night. And I think we did a lot here, and just getting us juiced up and prepared for principle number 1 and reading some of BJ's writings and talking about the journey. I mean, this is why we're together, to talk about what we have read, what we know in our experience, which we've also done the research on, and comparing and contrasting. This is what it really is. It's not, obviously, let's put it this way, it's not all black and white, right? It's not yes and no. There's gray area. And even from them recalling things of the past. But, that's why we're doing all this stuff, where you can't set the story 100% straight because we weren't there. But we can get a lot of really great information and talk about it because it's a lot of fun.
Before we close this meeting, I think you ought to read the second to the last paragraph of Article 309.
Well, we're not going to jump ahead like that.
Nope. We're
We
gonna
can read it over
we're gonna
and over.
start off with a bang on the next one. Bong, as Pasquale say. And Carol knows, yeah, absolutely. So we'll start on 356, the major premise, principle number 1. Okay. Bless you guys. Have a great night.
Have fun.
What's that?
Have fun.
Have fun.